We have a problem. They're video game characters.
The trailer for the final installment in the Jumanji trilogy just dropped, and I am definitely here for it. As you know, the third film, or the threequel, follows the massive success of Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle from 2017, and Jumanji Next Level from 2019. As you know, the rebooted franchise reimagined the iconic OG 1995 Jumanji film that starred the late Robin Williams and a very young Kirsten Dunst. Of course, these reboot films altered the story to resonate more with the current era by swapping out the classic Jumanji board for a video game. The only difference here is that in these films, we follow a group of teenage kids playing the game, and their in-game avatars are played by Karen Gillan, Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart, and Jack Black. Of course, the cast is returning in Jumanji Open World for one final run, and as we see in the trailer, for the final adventure, the film plans to reverse every other rule that they had previously established. Having said that, Jumanji Open World will be packed with callbacks to the original 1995 film, and given how much of it can be seen in the trailer itself, it is only fair to take a step back and discuss every hidden detail in the new trailer for Jumanji Open World.
Let's go.
Why do they run like that?
All the in-game characters are stuck in demo mode. So, the trailer of Jumanji Open World opens with the video game world of Jumanji escaping into the real world, as we see a crazy stampede of wild animals running across the streets. We then witness Spencer Gilpin spending some quality time with his family and friends during the holiday season, that too at a restaurant, until he is interrupted by a rhinoceros bursting through the building. But the crazier part comes when Spencer notices Dr. Xander Smolder Bravestone sitting at a table at the same restaurant before he is joined by Professor Sheldon Oberson, Franklin Finbar, and Ruby Roundhouse. As it turns out, these video game characters have somehow made it out of their game and landed in the real world, while all of them were stuck in demo mode. That is why Bravestone is speaking in a Spanish accent, because the glitch from the game has turned everyone into a stilted version of the avatar they play. So, yes, Professor Shelley Oberon's suspicion is correct, as they really were no longer in Jumanji. From the looks of it, it seems like the movie will deal with a rather complicated adventure, as Spencer tries to fix the world before it turns into a Jumanji game by placing the players back into the game. Having said that, the trailer only gives us a few seconds of dialogue about demo mode, but as you know, demo mode has a very specific meaning in video game design, and the trailer appears to be using that concept literally. In many classic video games, if nobody presses start, the game enters in attract mode, which is often casually called demo mode. During this sequence, the computer controls the playable characters, thus allowing the heroes to perform impressive moves, fight enemies, or walk through scripted environments to showcase the game, but they aren't making their own decisions. They simply follow pre-programmed routines until a player takes command. So, that seems to be exactly what has happened to Bravestone, Ruby Roundhouse, Mouse Finbar, and Shelley Oberon. Instead of being controlled by Spencer, Martha, Fridge, or Bethany, the avatars have materialized in the real world without players inside them. Since no one is holding the controller, it seems like the game's AI has taken over. This explains why Bravestone appears strangely stiff and overly heroic throughout the trailer. Rather than behaving like Spencer inside Bravestone's body, he behaves like the version of Bravestone that exists in the game's programming. He isn't pretending to be a fearless action hero anymore, but he rather is the fearless action hero because that's all his code allows him to be. Jumanji is spilling into the real world. As you know, up until now, every version of Jumanji has followed the same principle where humans always entered the game. Whether it was Alan Parrish being trapped inside the board game in 1995, or Spencer and his friends entering the video game in the 2017 and 2019 films, the danger always remained contained inside Jumanji. But in open world, the opposite happens, and instead of pulling players into its world, Jumanji itself spills into reality by bringing avatars, wildlife, enemies, and game mechanics into the real world. Given all elements of the game are stuck in a demo mode, this effectively turns the entire Earth into the game's newest level. Having said that, these demo mode avatars are not the only game elements that have crossed into reality because, like I previously said, there are rhinos crashing into restaurants, jungle animals roaming suburban streets, and enemies from Jumanji attacking civilians. If the heroes are running on AI, it is reasonable to assume the monsters are as well, which means that every creature and villain is simply executing its programmed behavior inside a world that was never designed to contain them. This opens up an interesting storytelling possibility. The avatars may initially fail to adapt to situations that fall outside their programming. I mean, just imagine Bravestone repeatedly trying to protect innocent people because the heroic rescue is part of his behavioral loop, while completely failing to understand everyday concepts like traffic laws, restaurants, or smartphones. Likewise, Ruby might treat every obstacle as an enemy encounter, and Finbar could analyze every stray dog or pigeon as though it were a dangerous jungle creature. Their competence inside Jumanji would become awkwardly misplaced in the real world. In fact, we even see Professor Shelley getting smashed under a truck and then having his life renewed as he falls from the sky, so at this point the rules of the new dynamic are a bit blurry. Body swapping returns again. I think one of the most interesting parts of the Jumanji open world trailer is that the franchise's signature body swapping mechanic appears to be evolving into something much more unpredictable than in the previous films. In Welcome to the Jungle, we saw that the rules were simple as each player selected an avatar and remained in that body for the duration of the game. But Jumanji: The Next Level complicated things by scrambling everyone's avatars after they re-entered Jumanji, thus creating much of the film's comedy as characters struggled to adapt to their unfamiliar strengths and weaknesses. Compared to that, Jumanji Open World seems to push the concept even further because the game itself has broken its own boundaries. The first half of the trailer also raises the obvious question about what happens when the players eventually reconnect with the game again, especially now that the avatars are stuck in the real world, that too in demo mode. Well, the final half of the trailer appears to answer it, as we see Spencer and his family returning to Jumanji while the avatars continue existing in reality, which low-key suggests that the game is now running two parallel worlds simultaneously. In order to prevent any more damage and set the world right, Spencer, his mother Janice, his younger brother Tyson, and the chef Donatas enter the game world of Jumanji, respectively taking on the avatars of Roundhouse, Bravestone, Finbar, and Oberon. Rather than assigning each player back to their familiar avatar, the trailer hints that Jumanji once again randomizes everyone into completely different bodies, much like The Next Level, but on an even larger scale. In fact, we see characters being super confused after entering the game, as scenes like Spencer's mom waking up Bravestone never stops being funny. At the same time, the trailer shows Bravestone and the other original avatars still interacting with Spencer's family in the real world, which means there could be two versions of each avatar existing within the story. One could be an AI-controlled version trapped in reality, while another version is inhabited by a human player inside the game. If that's how the mechanics work, it would create an entirely new dynamic for the franchise. The players would no longer simply struggle with unfamiliar bodies, they would also have to compete with or even outsmart their own avatars, whose programmed instincts might conflict with the player's decisions. Imagine Spencer finding himself inside Ruby Roundhouse while an AI-controlled Bravestone is independently trying to save civilians in the real world according to rigid hero routines. Cool, right? This also creates opportunities for both comedy and character development because the avatars would no longer function merely as costumes, but as independent personalities shaped by the years of their previous adventures. The final film in the trilogy will have to answer the mystery around Jurgen the Brutal. We are all eager to understand the biggest unresolved mysteries left behind by Jumanji: The Next Level, which revolves around Jurgen the Brutal, and so far all signs suggest that Jumanji Open World is finally positioned to answer it. At the end of the 2019 film, we briefly see Jurgen's character display a strengths and weaknesses menu after being struck in the chest, which is something that only playable avatars can possess throughout the reboot series. Now, ordinary NPCs never receive this interface. Plus, shortly after the film's release, Dwayne Johnson confirmed that this was intentional, thus revealing that Jurgen was not simply a computer-controlled boss, but the avatar of an unknown player, and he also added that the mystery would be explored in the next installment. Director Jake Kasdan and producer Hiram Garcia later confirmed that a sequel was being developed around unresolved story threads from The Next Level, making Jurgen's hidden identity one of the franchise's longest-running unanswered questions. The newly released Jumanji Open World trailer never mentions Jurgen by name, but its premise makes his mystery more relevant than ever. The film establishes that the barriers between Jumanji and reality have collapsed, thus leaving the game's avatars stranded in the real world, while the human players are forced back into the game. That breakdown of the player-avatar connection naturally raises questions about every avatar in Jumanji, and that includes Jurgen. If Bravestone, Ruby Roundhouse, Finbar, and Oberon can exist independently in demo mode, then Jurgen's unseen player may finally show up as someone who has been trapped in or manipulating the game for years. It is possible that Jurgen's player has become deeply intertwined with Jumanji after spending decades inside its world. Earlier films have established how that prolonged exposure changes people, as Alex Rica survived 20 years trapped in the game and became almost inseparable from his avatar. So, if Jurgen's controller has been stranded even longer, they may no longer be able to distinguish between their real identity and their in-game persona, thus explaining why Jurgen ruled as a ruthless warlord rather than behaving like a typical player trying to escape. Another possibility is that the unknown player intentionally remained inside Jumanji by eventually exploiting the game's mechanics from within. Since open world revolves around the game spilling into reality, the mysterious player behind Jurgen could also have played a direct role in triggering that catastrophe, or could turn out to be the only person who truly understands how to restore the game's broken rules. Jumanji Open World is a tribute to Robin Williams and Alan Parrish. From the trailer, marketing, and the interviews around Jumanji Open World, it seems like the final film of the modern trilogy serves as a love letter to the OG film that introduced millions to Jumanji through Robin Williams' unforgettable performance as Alan Parrish. By the looks of it, the movie is apparently going to honor Williams by bringing the franchise back to the themes and imagery that defined the 1995 classic. The trailer's biggest twist is that Jumanji escapes into the real world instead of pulling players inside, which sort of resonates with Alan's original story. In the first film, Alan spent 26 years trapped inside the game before the jungle spilled into Brantford as the players continued rolling the dice. In that sense, Open World recreates that same feeling of escalating chaos on a much larger scale, with stampeding animals, jungle hazards, and game characters invading ordinary neighborhoods, which makes the entire world feel like what Alan's hometown did during the climax of the original movie. The filmmakers have also included a more personal tribute, as Dwayne Johnson revealed that the production incorporated an original prop from the 1995 film, the iconic Jumanji dice, as a symbolic homage to Robin Williams. Johnson even wore one of the original dice as part of Dr. Smolder Bravestone's costume, because he wanted to pay a personal tribute to Williams and Alan Parrish. I think by returning the series to real-world chaos, practical survival, and the consequences of Jumanji escaping its confines, the film symbolically closes the circle that began with Alan's first roll of the dice. So, I guess I would have to go to the theater on 25th December with a box of tissues.
Come on, no time to waste!
The game might also be the main villain. So, the trailer repeatedly emphasizes that Jumanji has escaped into the real world as rhinos burst through restaurants, jungle creatures invade cities, the avatars become trapped in demo mode, and the normal rules of reality begin breaking down. Rather than introducing a new villain with dialogue or dramatic close-ups, the trailer focuses almost entirely on the consequences of the game malfunctioning, which makes Jumanji itself the most likely antagonist. If that reality happens, it would actually bring the franchise full circle, because in the 1995 film, Van Pelt, the giant spiders, and the stampeding animals weren't the true villains. They were simply hazards created by the magical game. The real enemy was always Jumanji itself, which kept generating new dangers until someone completed it. Open world appears to revive that concept, except it does it on a much larger scale, and instead of one house being transformed into a jungle, the entire world is becoming part of the game. If the villain is a malfunctioning game aiming to reshape the world according to its own unpredictable logic, our protagonists will surely not make it out of this fiasco easily. Well, that brings us to the very end of this video. What do you guys think might happen in Jumanji Open World? Let us know about your thoughts and theories in the comment box below. And so long until our next video.